All right. Good evening. Welcome to the December 13th, 2022 Development Review Commission hearing. The Development Review Commission is created to hold public meetings and hearings to provide analysis and recommendations to the City Council regarding general land use policies and applications, where the Commission has recommendatory power, and to render final decisions on specified applications where the Commission has final decision-making power, including, but not limited to, all aspects of a proposed and future development. The Development Review Commission recognizes that the creation of a desirable environment throughout the city for residents, businesses, and industry is a prime requisite for the interdependence of land values, aesthetics, and good site planning by promoting harmonious, safe, attractive, and compatible development that is therefore considered to be in the best interests of public health, safety, and general welfare. Any person aggrieved by a final decision of the Development Review Commission may file an appeal to the City Council within 14 calendar days after the Development Review Commission has rendered its decision. Development Review Commission recommendations to the City Council are not final decisions. Here with us this evening, representing the Commission, are Commissioners Michelle Schwartz, Don Casano, Vice Chair Andrew Johnson. I'm Chairman Mike DiDomenico, and also Commissioners Barbara Lloyd, Linda Spears, and Joe Forte. With us from staff, we have Director Jeff Tamulevich, Ryan Levesque, Steve Abrahamson, Saparna Dasgupta, Diana Kaminsky, Lee Jimenez, Karen Stovall, Lily Drosos, Sydney Dietering, Joanna Berry, and Jason Wolf. During tonight's hearings, it's our intention to have one specific case being heard. If you are here as a member of the public and wish to be heard on this case, you would catch our attention to make sure that you're not missed by filling out one of these white cards and bringing it up to staff so that we make sure that you get your chance to speak here at the podium. I'm going to take us through the agenda for this evening and let you know what our intention is as far as the cases before us. In our study session, we discussed the meeting minutes for the study session and regular meeting for the November 8th, 2022 meetings, and we made one minor clarification edit to those, and it's our intention to vote and approve those sets of minutes. In addition, the following cases are intended to be a part of our consent agenda. Those cases are items 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. That leaves case 8, which we intend to hear tonight. So if you're here and wish to be heard on case 8, we'll be able to get you up here and to speak on the record. If you are here, get my attention now if you're here to be heard on any of those other cases. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. Can I see a show of hands? Anybody who wish to be heard on those cases? Okay. So seeing none, we're going to vote on those as a part of our consent agenda. What happens on a consent agenda is we take one vote, and it's the Commission's intention to vote to approve all of those items, all those cases, with one single vote as a part of our consent agenda at the beginning of the meeting. Did I miss anything? No? All right. I will entertain a motion for approval of the minutes for November 8th, 2022. We have a motion from Vice Chair Johnson, second, and the second from Commissioner Lloyd. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let the record show that we have 6 votes for approval and abstentions from Commissioner Schwartz. Wait a minute. 5. Yeah, we have 5. 5 votes. And Commissioner Schwartz and Forte.
Casano was not there either.
And Casano. All right, so that we have 4 votes approving, with 3 members who were not at those meetings abstaining, and no votes against. Those minutes are approved. I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
I move for the approval of consent agenda.
Do we have a second? It's been moved and seconded by Commissioner Spears. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, raise your hand. You can vote on this one, because you are here. A motion approves, 7-0. That brings us to item number 8. This is a hearing for a request for a use permit to allow vehicle rentals for U-Cars within General Industrial District located at 640 South Smith Road. Lily, do you, oh, we do have, okay, the applicant is here in person. We'll have the applicant come up. State your name and city of residence for the record.
I'm Eric Foss. I'm with a Guidant law firm at 402 East Southern here in Tempe. And I'm here representing U-Cars at 640 South Smith Road. I'm here as part of the application for a use permit that U-Cars submitted to make their vehicle rental services compliant. U-Cars is a company that owns a fleet of vehicles that they lease out to rideshare drivers, Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. And they lease these vehicles out to the drivers. They usually have them out for a couple months. So they're a long-term leasing company, unlike Enterprise Rental Car, that sort of thing. The value proposition that U-Cars offers is a flat fee. So the car, the insurance, the maintenance, emissions, like every cost that would be associated with a car is a flat fee amount. And so that the business operators have the opportunity to know exactly what their vehicles are costing them. So that's a little bit of the background of what U-Cars does. Today is not really about use. I think the use is allowed in the zone with a use permit. The reason that we're here today is really parking. There's a parking issue on Smith Road, and neighbors are complaining about it. U-Cars has been working to actively solve the problem, but it's taking some time. And I'll tell you a little bit of the dynamic of the business and why there's a parking problem. We're also here today to ask for modification for 2 of the conditions of approval. 3 of the conditions, numbers 1, 2, and 5, are conditions that U-Cars can immediately comply with. Condition number 3, which has to do with the business hours, needs to be modified because part of the solution to the parking problem is going to be moving cars back and forth before and after hours. Number 4 is the condition that requires all of the business vehicles to be on site. And right now, they don't have enough parking on site to accomplish that, which is why the cars are being parked up and down Smith Road. So we're gonna ask for that. The background as far as the dynamics. There are a certain number of vehicles that are coming into U-Cars on a daily basis. It ranges from 5 to 10, sometimes 12 vehicles. There's a number going out, which is about 10 to 15 vehicles. There are more cars going out on the road on a daily basis than are coming in. That requires a couple of things. One, there has to be an inventory of cars ready to go out on the road. Because this is a long-term leasing company and not like Enterprise, where they can literally turn cars in 20 minutes sometimes, these cars have been on the road for months. And they're in for oil changes or repairs or routine maintenance. So the time requirement for turning the cars is greater than a short-term rental company. And this creates kind of a backlog of vehicles and the need for a certain amount of vehicles on hand. I'm specifically using the term on hand and not on site because we don't have enough parking spaces right now to have all the vehicles on site. One of the ways that they're addressing that problem is they've leased additional lots where they're storing their surplus vehicles. We have an agreement with Mako, which we happen to back to. They have a screened lot, which is one of the requirements for vehicle storage. In fact, that's the requirement that makes solving the problem so difficult. But they can handle about 40 cars. And that might sound like that is enough parking to immediately solve the problem, and it would be if the number of cars in the fleet was a static number. But because we're putting more cars on the road each week than we're actually taking in, they have to receive regular shipments of cars. So one of the things that we're looking for right now, and we've employed a broker to help us, find a lot or a separate location so that we can alleviate essentially the last, 40 cars. I drove by yesterday morning and counted 37 cars on the street. And that's about the number that we need to alleviate the problem. So right now they're seeking, one of two things: either a storage solution or a second location where they can open up and divert, a lot of the business elsewhere. They've just simply grown so fast that they've outgrown their on-site parking. And we're just trying to be as transparent as possible. Whether or not you agree with the modifications that we propose, we're going to need a reasonable amount of time to achieve compliance with the conditions. We certainly can do it by the time we come back in March, and we're hoping to do it, in 60 days or even, 45 days. But it is going to take some time to find a new property and negotiate a lease. So that's kind of the backstory. And I think that's enough to explain the modification that we're seeking for number 3. Because we'll have to port our cars to and from the lot, the storage lot from the place where they do business, we can't do that in a snap. Our business hours are 9 to 5. We'll need some time to get those cars off the road at the end of the evening. The reason we selected 7 p.m. is because that is the start time of the no overnight parking. And those signs have begun to appear in the neighborhood. We don't know exactly how much time it'll take to porter all the cars and clear the streets. So that's why we're requesting that condition be modified to be 7 p.m. instead of 5 p.m. As far as number 4 goes, there's a couple different layers to that. First, and let me, okay. So this is the property. This building is about 9,500 square feet. About 1/4 of it is office. The other 3/4 are a shop where maintenance occurs. Because of the size of the fleet, there's about 20 to 30 cars on site for maintenance, which is part of what's creating the problem. So the cars that are in queue to go out, they're parked on the street right now, as are some of the employee parking. We did a parking analysis based on the length of the cars. This is something that the on-site manager prepared. And one of the things that we would like to propose is, first, that we have the right to park in front of the business address. There are cars that get dropped off at night after business hours, and we need to have a place for those drivers to drop off the cars. So we're proposing that we have the right to park cars, receive cars in front of the business that we can work to clear by the next evening. When we have additional parking, we'll also be working to make sure that the 3 parking spots in the front driveway are available in the evening. But if a car is towed and left there by the tow truck, which does happen, they won't be able to get in to those parking spots. And so we'll need some on-street parking, which at a minimum it would be right in front of the building. Beyond that, what we're proposing is that we be able to park cars on the west side of Smith Road. Really all the action is on the right side. There's almost twice as many driveways, and that's where, you know, all of the businesses are that have more employee traffic. If we were to contain all of our cars on the west side of Smith Road, we believe that that would really alleviate the impact on the neighbors. So ultimately, what we're asking for is that we would be able to park cars in front of our building, along the west side of Smith Road, south of the bus stop, and have the time after business hours to be able to porter vehicles to and from our storage lots. And when we find the additional space, it's probably going to take some time to negotiate a lease. So, like I said a little earlier, we think, you know, we can do that in 60 days. But regardless, we'll be here in 3 months, accounting for either our success or failure.
Questions from the commission? Commissioner Spears.
I want to make sure I understand. You indicated that the leases are basically long-term leases, but they return the cars on a regular basis. I guess I'm confused about that. How long do they typically have a car?
The average lease is about 8 weeks. The fleet is it's over 400 now. So there are over 400 cars out in the communities. And so that amount of cars, you know, there's a certain amount that gets returned on a daily basis. And there's a certain amount that it either replenishes the car that came in if the car was returned for service, or it could just be a new, unique operator. But with that volume of cars on the road, there's just a certain amount of service and turnover that happens on a daily basis.
So on an average day, how many cars are you talking about being on the lot?
It's between, on the lot or being utilized in the neighborhood, 60 to 90.
Okay.
Yeah, it can range from 60 to 90 cars. And one of the things that, and I'll mention it again, is in order to keep putting more cars on the road each week, you know, eventually you run out of cars. And so shipments of cars will come in. They'll get a shipment of cars that's 20 to 35 cars. The biggest shipment they've ever had is 54 cars. And I'm sure that if I could give you the date of that shipment, you could find complaints, you know, around that date, because, you know, that's a lot of cars. So we're trying to find a facility that will allow us to, you know, store a large number of cars. There's some challenges to that. The screening is the biggest challenge. For example, there's a lot of places where there's extra parking. You know, my office is by Grace Community Church. They would allow us to park there. Every row is 23 cars. So, you know, one aisle is 46 cars. That would pretty much solve our problem. But it's not allowed because it's not that storage requires screening, so that isn't allowed. So there's a lot of places around the community that might seem like we could just lease and all the problems would be solved, but the screening requirement is a big hurdle. So,
Commissioner Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. I got two questions. In regards to your proposed modification to condition 4, is the parking that you're requesting on the west side of Smith temporary? Are you requesting that to just be temporary until you find a longer-term solution? And second question is, I believe UCARS is a tenant in this building. Can you share how long they have on a lease in this building, how long their commitment is to be in this location?
I think it's till 24. Right? It's a 5-year lease, and I think they started there in 2019. Yeah. Yeah, and yes, it would be temporary for a couple reasons. One, I think that's the general intent of the conditions. And we have a problem to solve, and we need to be diligent about it. Number two, the backdrop, elephant in the room, whatever you want to call it, is the Smith Road Improvement Project, right? So one of these days, there's going to be bike lanes on both sides of Smith Road. And so we've got to solve this problem before that. I attended the open house on Friday. There was some disagreement between the Tempe traffic personnel that were there and the consultants about when that would actually happen. But I left with the impression that the soonest we would see bike lanes is 6 months, and that it would probably not be any later than 18 months. And that really got our attention. So we are working on permanently solving this problem, because when those bike lanes show up, you can't park in a bike lane. So we will have to change the way we use this center, by the time the bike lanes show up. So yes, it'll be temporary. Yeah, we'll have to figure out a way to clear the streets. Until then, we're asking basically for some leniency to allow us to, continue our business operations as we solve the problem and work toward, clearing the streets, on a daily basis, knowing that eventually we're going to have to contain our entire operation to the site.
Chairman,
Commissioner Casano.
I'm looking at page 2 of your letter of explanation, and I'm looking at the last paragraph. As part of the use permit request, UCARS is seeking permission to continue parking a reasonable number of cars, a maximum of 30, in approved areas on Smith Road when available. Now, what I'm hearing is that's not what you're asking for.
I'd love that.
Because you said 40 to 60 cars, you said on Smith, but, so this is what you're stating in your letter of explanation, but it's not what I've heard from you tonight.
Yeah, and that's fair. So I met with staff. I met with Steve and Lily and Drew and Ryan on the 6th, so last Tuesday. And that was right up against the deadline for publishing the staff report. We met, I think we were parting ways about 4:30. So I didn't really have time to modify my letter of explanation beyond, what I'd already done. But the proposal for the west side, and this is why we did the parking analysis. And mind you, these marked areas are after they extended the red paint on either side of the driveways. And that was from a conversation that I had with Kathy Hollow a few weeks ago, where we don't want unsafe conditions there. When I first spoke with Lieutenant Hayes, he indicated, he kind of walked me through what types of complaints were being made. And then when I talked to Kathy Hollow, she kind of emphasized, our biggest concern are those complaints where people feel, like they can't see when they're coming out of the driveways. We don't want that either. In fact, UCARS puts cones, they were putting cones, to create, greater spacing. But if somebody drops off a car in the middle of the night and you can either move the cone or, park down the street, they're going to move the cone. And so, we indicated to Kathy that we'd be quite happy if you extended those red zones. And it wasn't more than a week later than they did. So these measurements were taken after those extended driveway spacing, the extra painting occurred. And what we're estimating is that we could park 23 cars. The pink is not very visible. I'm sorry. The preparer, there's really no color on this map that's that visible because of the way there's so many different colors. But on the west side, that totals 23 cars. And I'd love 30, but if we were to contain our parking to the west side of Smith, I think it would really alleviate the burden on the neighbors.
Go ahead, Dan.
Follow-on question. Well, how would an enforcement officer driving through there at night after you're closed know which cars were yours and which cars were not yours? So they would know that, oh, you've got a car parked on the east side, and we're gonna tow it or violate it or whatever, versus the other. Is there a sign on the cars? Is there,
Most of the cars are Toyota Priuses, like the vast majority. They do have some Camrys and a couple Kias in the fleet. But honestly, if it's a Toyota Prius, it's very likely one of the U-Cars, or it's an employee. They do buy. They'll sell cars to employees after they're at the end of their rotation. So a lot of the employees there actually drive Priuses. So.
Vice Chair.
I'm trying to understand your request to change condition number 4. Are you asking to have that delayed by 60 days? Or I understand you're requesting a transition period. Are you objecting to the condition completely, or are you objecting to when it's implemented? Which is the commitment to have all the cars off of the street?
We're objecting to that. And eventually, when the bike lanes arrive, we don't have any choice. Like that's going to trump everything that we're doing. But until then, at a minimum, it seems that it would be reasonable to allow us to park in front of our own business. At a minimum, that would give us a place for drivers dropping vehicles after hours to drop their vehicles. Or if a tow truck brings in a vehicle after hours, that would be a place for them to drop the vehicle.
And you mentioned signs going up that there's no overnight parking. So they already can't do that if it's posted they can't park a car overnight.
Yeah,
They should not be doing that if it's posted, right?
So they're posted in a very limited number of places. In fact, when they started posting them, I jumped on. In fact, that was the day. It was the day before a day of our meeting. I got on the phone with Kathy Hollow and just said, "Hey, we're right in the middle of a land use application. Can we finish this process before you start putting those signs up?" And she said, "Yes. We won't put up any more." So there were a few south of U-Cars, and then they've placed them on either side of the driveway to try to create that extra spacing. And maybe they're there to have a vertical display of where that red paint ends in case somebody doesn't notice it. But for the most part, they're not being placed just up and down the roadway. They're being very strategically placed at the entrances of the driveways to create that desired visual clearance. So right now, like we have almost just as many opportunities to park on Smith Road as before, with the exception that the driveway aprons have been widened with the additional red paint. So we're not parking illegally yet. Some may debate that, but we're not parking in front of a no parking sign.
Okay, we'll probably hear from people, I guess, tonight, but, so I'm just trying to understand your request on these conditions. So number 3, you'd request that be adjusted to 7 PM.
Right.
And number 4, your request is to have that removed completely or modified?
No, it's modified. The way we've written it is that basically we can park in front of our business.
West side.
We can park on the west side of Smith or on site or on one of our storage lots. So, which is always allowed. So essentially, we want to be able to park on the west side of Smith Road until that day when no parking is allowed on Smith.
Okay, thank you.
One quick question.
Commissioner Casano.
You talk about parking in front of your business. How many cars can you park in front of your business? It's not that large an area.
It's not 5.
5. So,
5.
you know, there's no way you can park all your cars in front of your business.
You're right. There is no way, but what it would do is it would allow for the overnight drop-offs.
You don't have more than 5.
Generally not. Yeah, generally
But
not.
how would you segregate that from where the rest of the cars are? You're parking the rest of the cars on Smith, not your drivers? Is that how that works?
Right.
In
Right.
other words,
The company is using Smith Road as a storage area right now.
But a driver couldn't put it in a storage area. It has to drop it off in front of the business. Am I correct?
We would instruct the drivers that they would have to drop their evening cars off in front of the business.
Or they would have to take them back home, I guess, huh?
Yeah, and right, and that's the reality is the drivers all store their cars. Of the 400 that are out, they're getting stored at their homes at night, yeah.
Okay.
So we would have to notify the drivers of kind of the change of the rules. And like I said, like there's a lot of moving parts here that it's going to take us a couple months to really have this dialed.
Okay. Other questions before we hear from staff? Thank you. Sit tight.
Actually, could the applicant just put the proposed language back up there, what you're proposing for that condition 4? Because I don't think we have that.
Yeah, so essentially the bold at the end of each paragraph is our proposed language. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Do we have that exhibit that was up? Do we have that printed?
Here it comes.
And asked and answered. Thank you.
and Chairman, I just also wanted to make sure you knew that Kathy Hollow is online if you needed any clarification from her.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Chair DiDomenico and members of the commission. My name is Lily Drosos, and I am a planner with the City of Tempe Community Development Department. UCARS is located at 640 South Smith Road, just north of University Drive, on the west side of Smith Road and south of 5th Street. They're requesting a use permit to allow vehicle rentals within the general industrial district. UCARS leases vehicles to rideshare companies such as Uber and Lyft. Rentstock Auto Repair and Body Shop also services vehicles on the site. The combined uses require 31 spaces on the property per the Zoning and Development Code Section 4-603, and 36 are provided on site. The site area is 35,196 square feet. This is their site plan showing 36 spaces on site. The building area is 9,405 square feet, and here is the layout of the businesses on the site. In the past year, the businesses have received 4 code violations, 3 of which have been closed. The current active violation is for operating the vehicle rental business without a use permit. Complaints have been received by code compliance, the police department, fire department, and the engineering and transportation department. The complaints are related to a high volume of vehicles generated by UCARS and Rentstock. being parked on both sides of Smith Road and Fifth Street. The concern is that the overflow of vehicles on the street makes the road more narrow and poses safety concerns and threat of collisions. A neighborhood meeting was not required for the use permit. Staff has received 7 comments voicing opposition to the use permit. This does not include the complaints received by the other departments. Staff is recommending approval subject to conditions. We have taken the comments received by the public into consideration and have imposed non-standard conditions of approval to help appease these concerns. The non-standard conditions of approval are that the applicant must return to the Development Review Commission for review of compliance with conditions of approval on March 14th, 2023. The timing for the 3-month review period begins when the decision for the use permit is made and advise community development staff when in full business operation. Then this is the second, all vehicles generated from the businesses shall be kept on site in parking areas or other designated storage lots at all times. And then the last non-standard condition is that in compliance with the Zoning and Development Code, Section 4-702C, all front yard and landscape areas and driveway entrances shall remain clear of any vehicle parking. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Go back to the aerial, if you would, right there. All right, so we show 36 paved numbered spaces. What is, in the southwest corner, we have what looks like a retention area of some sort. Any reason, could that be paved and additional spaces be created there? If you're not familiar with the site, I don't want you to guess, but.
Chairman DiDomenico, members of the commission. I honestly don't know whether or not that could be paved. There's the potential that that is required retention. We'd have to consult engineering on that.
Okay. I notice in the photos that come after this, if you scroll to the black and white photos, it looks like on the bottom left corner you see parking up along the building. So if you go back to the aerial, is that something that's allowed if they did parallel parking and even double stacking in the drive lanes of cars? It's not uncommon for a car rental business, you know, your standard Avis at an airport has valet parked cars double stacked all over the place. Could they create, I guess what I'm getting at is how many more spaces do we think they can create on site here and still maintain a drive lane to have circulation? Any guess? Not your problem to solve. I'm going to ask the applicant that same thing to see if they've looked into that.
I think we may need to evaluate it through site plan review and seek feedback from the other departments, as there are issues that would affect the other divisions.
Fire and refuse.
Well, yeah, I'm talking, you know, primarily at night when there's, you know, car storage, when that's what they're doing is primarily storing cars on site, you know, after 5 o'clock. If you look at the site, and you don't really have it here on there, but if you looked at an aerial, the site immediately to the north of this is a small industrial building with truck wells and then a field of stacked cars, bumper to bumper. It looks like another automotive operation of some sort, but a huge surface lot full of automobiles. And then several dirt lots to the west of this property. I think that may be the Mako site, maybe storage for them, but it's not paved. It looks like it's, you know, it's unimproved parcel. Okay, thank you, I appreciate it. Other questions, Commissioner Spears?
This is a request for a use permit to allow them to do business. If we do not approve a use permit, that means they have to cease doing business at this location? Is that bottom line?
That is correct. They have an active code violation for operating without the use permit. So if they are unable, if the use permit is denied, then they would need to relocate.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for staff? Vice Chair.
I have a follow-up on that. So do we have an understanding of why there was no use permit already in place for this use? I guess from the applicant, maybe?
Vice Chair Johnson, members of the commission, we received a complaint. We had no idea that this operation was, existed, and to the extent to which the violations were, again, just as Lily had outlined, we'd received complaints through PD, through code compliance, engineering, streets. So we did not know until we received those complaints. They simply opened their doors without checking into what might be needed as far as to safely and efficiently and legally operate.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any follow-up, commissioners, with the applicant before we call to the public for clarification? We'll get another chance to have the applicant come back up. All right, I understand that we have several comments that wish to be read into the record but did not want to appear in person. Steve, if you want to read those into the record to get us started.
That is correct, Chairman DiDomenico, members of the commission. We have three comments that I will read into the record this evening. The first one is from a Mr. Ruben Solis. He represents Peterson Air Care in Tempe. His comment is, UCARS performs a large amount of business, good for the economy and all around, at their business location. Huge, actually. I don't have much faith that they will begin to obey common traffic laws with the permits they are allowed. As I have written previously, the employees have no respect for traffic laws for their neighbors. This reflects directly to their management or lack thereof. Their priorities for public safety are second to their financial pockets. They have a huge quantity of employees, customers, and vendors that surround their location daily. All day, every day, I experience loud cars, roaring their engines, racing up and down the street, honking due to misparked cars, street crossings, scary vendors attempting to enter and exit their property safely or not, and they take up parking spaces in surround properties like where I work. Some drivers park where I work, then return at the end of the day to take their own vehicles home. Once again, I've previously written, I'm glad no one has gotten hurt up to now, as far as I am aware of. Please have them search for a properly sized location where the public is not put in jeopardy. Thank you. Second comment is from a Mr. Michael Urata, representing AHR Mechanical. Mr. Hirata Hugada, Jagoda. He resides in Scottsdale. His comment is, the excessive parking of vehicles by UCARS on our local roadways near 5th and Smith in Tempe is a danger to local businesses, their employees, and current/potential clients. There are very little available parking spots due to all these cars. The roadway is now narrowed by cars parked on either side of the street, causing dangerous situations for pedestrians and locals trying to work and do business. It is nearly impossible to pull out of the parking lots due to restricted vision created by all those cars lined up and down the streets. We don't park our vehicles / products on the streets, neither should they. Third and final comment this evening is from Mr. Jeff Lane. He is a citizen representing himself. He resides in Tempe. Comment is as follows. This company has willfully disregarded public safety in parking multiple cars for their company use on Smith Road and Fifth Street. To find out that they are operating without a permit is simply another example of their complete disrespect and disregard of rules and fellow man. They have not cared for more than a year, and only then once their neighbors started to complain. If the city had, if the city had not been required to intervene, I don't believe they would have ever tried to get the proper permits for their business. I have nearly been hit by their vehicles on multiple occasions on on Smith Road. When they have car carriers delivering, they park in the middle of the road to unload, leaving little room on each side to get by in a safe manner. Talking to other neighbors, this has affected the safety of their employees and their customers. Please decline their permit, as I do not believe they will cooperate with the stipulations and conditions of this permit and will continue to break rules that they have purposely broken on a consistent basis. Thank you. That is it.
Thank you, Steve. I have one card before me for a member of the public who wishes to be heard. The card is for James Farrington. Anyone else wish to be heard? Okay, can you bring that forward and get it to staff? Thank you very much. Mr. Farrington, if you could come forward to the podium. All we need for the record is your name and city of residence.
My name is James Farrington, and I live in Phoenix. Can I have the map that the gentleman representing the company of the map overlay or overview? Can you all see that if I talk about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, I owned Tempe Crane for 32 years, and I own the property that it is now occupying. That property is in the upper left-hand corner, and I built that property under the rules provided by City of Tempe, and it was a big job. It cost me about $2 million. And I don't park anything on the street, period. I do require access, going out, coming in, and the cars that we're talking about were parked all along the street, all the way up to Fifth Street, and then they ran out of room, so they came over on ours. On Fifth Street to, we have relatively large vehicles, and if I parked them on the street, there'd be problems. I do business, or they do business, I don't do it anymore, and my people, Tempe Crane's personnel have gone to talk to them, and they'll say, oh yeah, we'll do that, we'll move that, and they don't. So we were instrumental in getting the no parking signs. I mean, it's just, to think they don't, we have to qualify for all those rules. When I built that property, it's absurd. And I have crane operators driving down that street with cars on both sides and a truck sitting in the middle unloading cars right in the middle of the street. It's absurd. And the fact that they're doing it or allowed to do it at all, much less, oh, can we have a couple months? I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right. So that's my point. Thank you.
Questions, commissioners? Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Robert Johnson.
My name is Robert Johnson. I live in Gilbert. I work for the property management company. Can we have that same map? So 625 South Smith is the U-shaped building. Oh, the U-shaped building directly across the street. So we share a driveway adjacent to one of their driveways. So the south part of our 625 is the same driveway of U-cars. And I just had a couple questions or just comments as I was listening to the gentleman. I'm concerned about how they plan to supervise these commitments to keep on the west side. That has not been our experience with them. They're very polite, and every time we engage with them directly with them, they do respond, and they're very good neighbors in that way. But it's not 24 hours later that we get complaints that it's the exact same thing that happens again. So for them to stay on the west side, I'm concerned that how they're planning to make that happen. Because I've been on site and I've had people park on our parking spaces, and I asked them, I say, hey, you guys can't park here because it's private property. And they seem to be not directly connected to U-cars. They don't seem to have a direct line of communication, at least from my experience. They respond to me like, well, I'm just here to drop off my car to get my brakes done, or I'm here, there doesn't seem like there's a good chain of communication between the people that I've actually talked to on the ground and what they're proposing with management. So that's my concern. And then I think it's been commented on, but the open-ended nature of their request, I'm concerned about that. I understand that they said that they have a terminus date with bike lanes, but I feel very uncomfortable just leaving it open-ended. If they said we need 30 days, that would maybe be different, but for them to say there's no time frame here, that's concerning. My other note is they say they can park 5 cars here, and then he mentioned that when he was on site, he said he saw 39 cars on the street. Another time he mentioned 97 total cars. He says that they can park 23 on the west side. I've heard so many different numbers, and I'm looking at this right now thinking half of these pink, and I understand that this was a report generated, so maybe they're not assuming they can park in any of those pink spots, but there's all of these pink spots from that driveway up are private property. Those are all private property. The west side, if this side can only handle 23 cars, and they're requesting 30, there's a disconnect. And then he said at any given time, there's up to 97 cars that they have. I think the scope of what he's explained is far less in reality. The reality is they have cars that go all the way up to 5th Street and then go down 5th Street. And they are one backed up against each other on both sides. And what everybody's concerned about is that when you go out any one of these driveways, they're so far close to the edge that you cannot see traffic coming and going, and it is very scary. It is genuinely scary. You got cars coming up, down, you can't see them. You're like risking, you're like, let's go, and you have to go out into Smith Road, and it is really scary. Then my last comment was that the gentleman mentioned ongoing growth for his company. And that's great. I'm happy for them. I don't have any problem with U-Cars, but they are already past capacity for this location, and it is quite obvious. They have already reached over capacity for their current space, for their business. It is more than obvious. So what's their end goal here? Like wait till 2024 until their lease runs out and then find a new space? That's not acceptable. That's all.
Questions, Commission? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, final call to the public. Have we missed anybody? Raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll close the public comments portion of this hearing. And I'll call for the applicant to come on back up. I imagine we've got some follow-up questions. Before we get into that, I'll give you an opportunity if you'd like to respond to anything you've heard or any questions that have been brought up you'd like to just answer for us.
Sure. Yeah, there's a problem. And I was trying to be completely transparent about that, on the front end. We're not trying to hide anything. We're also not waiting to do anything. We've been, upfront about the number of cars that, sometimes are on hand. And we've also started working on solutions, including the 40 parking spaces at Mako next door. We're trying to find another lot that would alleviate most of the problem. Yeah, we do want the right to park on the west side of Smith Street. That's something you can either modify the condition or deny it. Whatever we have to do, we're going to do it, and we're going to be back here in 3 months to account for it. And even if you grant the modification and give us the language that we would like, someday we're going to have all of the cars off the street because the bike lanes are coming, and we know that. As far as how would we contain the cars to the west side, the way we would do that is by securing another lot and just offloading those vehicles. We're not asking for an unlimited amount of time. We think we can accomplish this in the next 60 days. Like I said, we'll be back here in 90 to account for that. The question's been asked, how did we get to this point? My understanding is, and I was hired at the end of October to help U-Cars when they received the code violation. My understanding from the history is that this was originally opened as a repair and maintenance component of their business, and they thought that leasing was allowed, and they were wrong. And that's just the bottom line.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Spears.
This may be an unrelated question, but are they paying sales tax on those leases?
They pay a lot of sales tax to the city of Tempe, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Lloyd.
I have one more question, but I think it's for staff, just in terms of the condition they modified about 9 to 7 instead of 9 to 5. Is there any issue with that from your perspective?
Commissioner Lloyd, I don't think staff has any issue with them extending the hours if that means it gives them more time to move cars off-site in designated areas.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Schwartz.
Well, that kind of contradicts their letter to staff saying their hours of operation are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So maybe explain the difference.
Yeah, those are our business hours. But if we're going to need to clear the streets, we need some extra time to do that. When we originally filed the application, we honestly didn't anticipate this level of restriction. So we weren't anticipating enlarging the business hours to allow for what eventually was given to us as a condition of approval. And again, when we met with, when I met with staff a week ago, it was in the late afternoon. And if it had been in the morning, perhaps, you know, I would have had time to modify that. But at that point, it was already part of the report. So short of staff rewriting the report that afternoon and publishing something different, that's why it says what it says, because that was what we originally put down as our hours. And that's when the business closes, but if we need to porter cars, we need more time to do it.
Vice Chair Johnson.
Yeah, my question relates, I realize you've only been with them for a few months now, since October, as you mentioned, but when they originally opened this business, has parking cars on the street always been part of their operations? When did this become an issue, and how long have they been working to address this issue?
You know, I don't know the exact answer, but my understanding is that the last year has really been the problem. Is they've grown to the point where it's begun to impact the neighbors, and that most of the complaints are over the last year.
And over the last year, they've only been able to acquire 40 parking spaces off-site?
Yeah, it's, I spoke to this earlier. The screening requirement for car storage is our biggest hurdle. There are lots around the city that have room for parking, but short of us, you know, building a 6-foot block wall on somebody's site, we're having a hard time finding screened parking areas. We hired a broker. He's looking valley-wide. You know, UCARS has really come to the realization that, you know, they may need to relocate their operations entirely. They don't want to leave Tempe. Like I said, they started in Tempe years ago. And, you know, that's kind of where this is where their roots are. We're hoping is that we can have a satellite operation here on Smith Road, and then find a larger facility either in Mesa or Phoenix. And they're actively looking for that.
Other questions? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
I have one more question for staff. Lily, if you want to come back up. A couple of times, a reference to a city requirement for screening around automobile parking has been brought up. Now, I know we've got car dealerships all over town that have lots full of, well, they used to have lots full of cars. Now they have lots half full of cars that have nothing more than a small sight wall, a stem wall around the parking lots, all visible to the street. So am I missing something here? Is this particular use saddled with a higher requirement?
Yes, Chair DiDomenico, because this use is for vehicle storage rather than the vehicle sales, it requires them to meet the screening requirements and have the parking on an improved surface. And that is in section 4-706 of the zoning code. And it would be preferred that they found another zoning district within the general industrial district or other industrial district to have this storage.
So help me understand why this is determined to be storage, because I'm guessing that the amount of time that one of these vehicles remains on the lot from drop-off to cleaning and repair and being put back into service is probably a shorter period of time than the typical auto body shop, car dealer, anybody else has a car sitting on their lot. So what makes this storage that another use isn't storage? And you can punt this one to anybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not trying to trick anybody. I just don't know the
No,
difference. I don't
right.
know.
You want to answer?
Chair DiDomenico, members of the commission. If it is part of a fleet, and this is a fleet of cars rather than individuals going to a retail outlet as an example, retail would only have a 3-foot wall. If they're parking it within general industrial and they are storing them, I mean, basically it needs to be screened, and the screen walls in general industrial and storage lot are 6 feet high. Now, if they had parking around the front, you'll see that they do have a 3-foot wall. That is different. That's customer parking for the most part. But this is storage of vehicles. It is a fleet. So in general industrial, those lots are screened by a 6-foot wall.
Still feels like a little bit of semantics to me. How about this? The requirement that if they were to find a lot and were able to lease it, that they would need to build a 6-foot block wall as opposed to a simple chain link fence with the appropriate screening. Does that also suffice?
Okay, straight away, we would not allow chain link fences.
No chain link.
In Tempe at all, because that's not screening completely. But let's talk about if they were to find another lot within general industrial, and it really would depend upon the property. If there were spaces out in the front and they only had a 3-foot wall, that's one thing. But as an example, Eric brought up the potential for parking at Grace Community Church, and that's 3 miles away and is in a different zoning district.
Category.
And you can't really store vehicles per se in PCC 1 where that is located.
Yeah.
It's preferable that they find a supplemental lot in that neighborhood, and chances are the vast amount of storage that it would take would be in an area that is screened by a 6-foot wall. But if they could find a property that is, let's say, vacant for now and has parking in the front, yeah, that 3-foot wall is going to work, and then the 6-foot wall that surrounds the balance of the property would screen the other cars.
So there may be something out there. I just know from direct experience that on Perry and on Smith, if you go to, and there's so many automotive uses in this district, that you're going to find auto repair shops and Mako and others that do not have block walls, that have chain link. And they have the mesh or the screening embedded in so that you don't visually aren't impacted. And most of the time it's protecting its common property lines between two users as opposed to the street side, where it's not quite so ugly for the passing public. But I'm hopeful that this applicant, should they continue to be in business in this location, can find a close lot that they can lease to put all of this off the street and move it. But building a block wall, I realize, for another 2 years in this location probably makes no sense at all. Okay, I appreciate the explanation so I understand the rule.
One quick question here.
Commissioner Casano.
I'm looking directly at this area, directly west of their parking in the back of their building, and I see there's a lot. It doesn't look like it's improved at all. But since it's interior to everything else, does that require a 6-foot block wall if you wanted to park vehicles in it? You see what I'm looking at? I don't know who
Yes,
that belongs to, but
Commissioner Casano, members of the commission. One must bear in mind that this was not too long ago all county island. And when it was annexed by the city, a lot of these properties were grandfathered in. That might have been a storage lot at one time and continues to be so, and there have been no substantive changes to require additional screening.
so if they were to lease a spot like that, they could continue with that, the owners
In theory, you'd have to check to see whether it's grandfathered in, so on and so forth,
I was
but
just looking at it, and there doesn't appear to be, since it's interior to everything else, it's not on, has no street frontage.
we'd
So
have to
nobody would
investigate
really
it.
see it.
That's true.
So it's
That's
screened
true.
in a lot of other ways. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for staff? No? Thank you very much. At this point, I would ask for a motion if anyone has one, or if you've got any clarifying questions, get something on the table and we can certainly discuss it. Commissioner Spears.
I would move for the approval of UCARs with condition 3 being modified to reflect 7 PM and the condition 4 not being modified.
Do we have a second?
I would second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Spears. We have a second from Vice Chair Johnson. Any discussion on the matter amongst the commission? Staff, any issues with the motion? Any conflicts? 7 o'clock is the only change we've made to the staff recommendation, so we're okay with that. Or
We're
staff
okay
is.
with that. And Chairman, I don't know if you wanted to ask Kathy if she had any other update about the no parking signs and when they would go off.
That would be interesting to know if there's timing on what's going to happen along Smith. Kathy, are you out there? Can you hear?
I am. I'm out here, Cyberland, watching you all.
Thank you.
So, yes. So we, as a policy within the department, if a business wants no parking in front of their business, we will do it. And we've had requests from several businesses along Smith to have the no parking signs put up. We started to do it just as an overnight, no parking in 3 locations, 2 on Fifth and 1 on Smith. And then when this meeting was coming up, I said, well, let's stop and see what the result of the meeting is. And then we will go listen to what the businesses ask for. And we'll be going out and putting out more no parking signs in front of businesses probably tomorrow. So we will not put them in front of UCARs. They did not request them. They will not have it in front of their building. But if other businesses do request it, then our policy is that we would put it out.
So
right now,
until such time as a mandated traffic control change is made the entire length of Smith Road, UCAR would still have the ability at night to have a car dropped off, roughly 5 spaces parallel parked in front of that property, would still be open and available for overnight drop-off?
in front of their property, correct.
Okay. On the west side of Smith. Okay. Other questions for Callie? Commissioner Lloyd.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to get clear on this condition 4. We're keeping it as it was written by staff, and that all vehicles generated from the business shall be kept on site in parking areas or other designated storage lots at all time. Would that not mean that they don't park on the street regardless? And secondly, can you take me through the process of what would trigger a violation of this use permit based upon this condition 4?
Well, that's a staff question, but yes, the staff report is saying no street use, even directly in front of and adjacent to their property. That is a condition or a benefit that all other businesses in this district have a right to do, unless it's specifically marked that you can't park in front of your business. Tempe Crane could park vehicles, regular sized vehicles in front of theirs, unless they requested the city to specifically sign it so that it's disallowed. So our motion that's in front of us to vote is bringing a more severe restriction for the 5 spaces in front of U-Car than is already in place, regardless of the use.
And I think that what concerns me about this is that I would like to believe that in good faith, they would try and do something about this. But I don't know that that's going to happen without the hammer that says you have to find someplace else to store your vehicles. I mean, I can appreciate, I drive on Smith, I appreciate the issues with traffic. I don't know that I want to see enforcement officers out there checking to make sure they're not parking on the street. But in good faith, I'd like to see that remain as written.
Okay. Other discussion from the commission? Commissioner Schwartz?
Yeah, I'm just curious on number 4 again, what is kind of that compliance strategy put forward by the city to ensure that that's happened? Is it just coming back with no code violations by March, or are there other plans in place to ensure compliance?
Steve, you want to
Commissioner
tackle that?
Schwartz, members of the commission, I would imagine that it would be self-enforced in the regard that should we get complaints from the city, from code compliance, from PD, that they're not doing their job, and then we would investigate it, and, it would become a circumstance where they'd be ratted out, so to speak.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And what we'd hope wouldn't happen is that in March, the case is brought back to us and there's several called-in complaints and no way for the business to really be able to prove or disprove whether or not it was their vehicle. Now, if code enforcement goes out and says, yeah, it's a yellow Prius and it's, it's registered to U-Cars, that's different. But if it's, somebody's personal vehicle or, someone visiting the repair shop in that same complex, parked there, we've got to somehow be able to discern who the violator is. But that may be a problem for down the road, not tonight. Vice Chair.
And I think just to clarify number 2, that would be up to the Development Review Commission whether to, what action should be taken after that 3-month period has ended. And we would hear what has happened, and if there are violations, then I think it's kind of back on our plate to decide if that's something that, do we have another 3-month period, or is that, the time that we no longer say this permit is acceptable. So I think it comes back into our court at some point, and we just have to evaluate what has happened in those 3 months.
Okay. Commissioner Spears?
Chair, and I would also like to recommend to the applicant that they do look into how you get more parking. Would it be possible to do tandem parking or in overnight hours or something, if that is retention, if there's a way to utilize that during the time or whatever. So I think you've got time to get some creative ideas and not, I'm not trying to make this go away, but the business go away, I should say. I want the problem to go away. But if it's a good business, they're generating sales tax for the city. I'd like to think that we're helping them do business rather than trying to prevent it.
I appreciate that. That's a good comment. All right. If we don't have any other discussions or questions, I am going to call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by raising your hand. And those opposed, let the record show that the motion carries 5-2 with Commissioner Schwartz and Forte in dissent. Members of the public, just a reminder, if you have issue with this and wish to appeal the decision that's been rendered tonight, you have 14 calendar days to notify the department that you wish to have an appeal. 14 days from today's date. Other items, commissioners, any announcements? Oh, I bet you do. Commissioner Forte.
We have a Keep Tempe Beautiful cleanup at A Mountain, Tempe, Hayden Butte on Saturday at 8 a.m.
We're not painting the A again, are we?
No painting, just
Okay.
cleaning up trash.
All right, wonderful.
Keeping Tempe beautiful, you know?
What's the date?
This Saturday,
17th at what time?
8 p.m. or 8 a.m.
8 a.m.
Yes.
You guys never rest, not even for the holidays. It's amazing.
The trash doesn't rest. You know?
Fantastic. Commissioner Casano.
Yes, I would just like to wish everybody here happy holidays, and we'll see you in January.
Thank you very much. Same to all of you. Meeting adjourned.